what is your number one tip advice for prospective students? Let's go to Anna first.
My advice would just be research the process, know what you're getting into, and know how that's going to fit in with your home life, how being residential would fit in with your ties to your family or your responsibilities at home, your financial status. Sometimes I found it hard to not, wouldn't be able to work or kind of provide for some of the things I would need to. But also I would just stay authentic, make sure you know what it's offered so you can just appeal to that in your application. But that's pretty much it.
Great. Let's go to Angela.
For me, I would say my number one tip of advice is your essays. At this point in the application process, it's almost impossible, or it's really hard for you to add on a bunch of new extracurriculars or awards. And then your letters of recommendations from your teachers, those are really important too. And I would definitely try to find teachers that you know well, but at this point in the application process, it's also too late to try to get like a wonderful recommendation if you don't have one already. So the one thing that you have like complete control over for the application process is your essays and what you can write in that. So based on the advice that we've said previously in this webinar about how to incorporate your essays, I would say that is the one thing that you should focus the majority of your time on for the application.
Great. Let's go to Shashank next.
Yeah, so I think my number one piece of advice, you and kind of like what I said before, start early on your essays. If you haven't started your essays, start right now, right after you shut off this webinar, because starting early is really going to be your best chance of look. It's going to give yourself the best chance to look at your essays and really see if they're quality. And yeah, you really just don't want to be rushing it. And for your essays, really just focus on bringing out your interests, your genuine interests, not what you think SSM wants to hear, but what do you really want to do with your career, what you want to do with high school. And it's not even that you have to know exactly what you want to do. I mean, all of you guys are applying your sophomores, so nobody's really expecting you to know exactly what kind of job you want to go into. But just talking about what you're interested in and how you envision expanding on that in high school is really the number one thing that I would bring about in your essays, and it's probably the most important thing that you can do right now to apply. And if you're not a sophomore, I guess because my advice would differ a little bit. If you're younger, maybe you're a freshman or eighth grader, really focus on keeping your grades like high. Try getting A's and everything. And it's not necessary to get all A's in order to get in, but really do the best that you can in all of your classes. And yeah, again, work out your interests and try to reflect that in your essays.
Great. Lastly, we'll go to Elena.
I would say to definitely take your time with this, like everyone else is saying, and at the end, look over what you've done and see if it like accurately portrays you. So when I was applying, a senior SSM told me that admissions officers, like they usually spend 8 minutes on an application. So I would say like once you're done, maybe just like read through what you've put together, look at it all, and try to think if it like accurately portrays who you are. Because for me, at least, it definitely, I seemed kind of one-dimensional with my essays. So you want to truly just include all like aspects of your personality, of what you've done, and just have an application that you feel really represents you.
Great. We stopped 5 minutes short. That was the last question we had, but we do have open Q&A. So if you do have questions, if we have time, we will ask the panelists. There was a question that came through in the chat. In terms of essay writing, do you recommend college application essay style, or like a narrative story, or a descriptive text paragraph? Let's go to Shashank first.
So I think your type of essay would really depend on what events you're writing about. Personally, I did it more of, I guess, what you would call a college application style, kind of like a narrative story, but you also don't want to be completely just describing what you did. Like, and this is kind of what we as a panel alluded to earlier. You want to describe what you're doing and be very clear in that, because sometimes the admissions officers don't really know what certain extracurriculars are. But also, very like, make sure you hit the point of what you learned from what you did, and like, I guess, what your actions have taught you, and how you can apply those lessons that you've learned in the future. So like, in terms of the style, I wouldn't say it matters that much, as more, it's just more like getting these important points across. However, whatever style fits your writing is that's acceptable.
Great. Let's go to Elena next.
Yeah, so I agree with Shashank. I think writing it like a college application style, I guess, is probably like the way to go, because you want to be reflective and show like what your thoughts. Like I kind of said this earlier, but like a narrative story, it usually goes into a lot of details that don't tell the admissions officer anything about you, and you only have like 2,000 characters. So that's not too many. You really, I think it's like good to not have a ton of fluff and just reflect a ton. Yeah, so I would say like narrative story or a lot of description, they tend to have a lot of like excessive details, like I could feel the sweat dripping down my back as I walked into the room. And like, you don't really need things like that. You can just be like, I was worried. Or like, I think a lot of them, like, it definitely like a flair to your writing is nice, but you want to be concise-ish and like cover all of your points first before you start adding like style.
Yeah, and I'd also like to touch on that with, of course, I didn't apply to SSM or anything, but, I've hosted a lot of these panels with college admission officers. And a lot of the time they see what Alina says, where, they set up the story for like 75% of the essay, and then for the other 25%, they say the lesson they learned. You gotta more focus on the lesson you learned. You don't want to add too much fluff, right? So, yeah. Next, we'll go to Angela.
Uh, so for my essays, they were mainly narrative. I'm gonna tell the truth. I did have an essay that the one that was about like why you want to come to NCSM, that was framed like very much like a college admissions essay. But I think for the majority of the other essays, at least for the introduction for it, I usually started off in a narrative type of sense. I think that's just the way I write personally, since I tend to write like short stories and stuff. It's a habit for me to write essays also in a narrative sense. But I definitely agree with what Alina has said about like the fluff or describing things that aren't important to your story. So I think when I was talking about narrative, when I tried to describe things, I described only what I was feeling or things that are very, very important. But if you do things that Alina says and you're trying to paint a background in a narrative, that's where like the point gets drawn away. I hope I'm making sense. But I think how you write an essay, it's okay to incorporate some narrative as long as the focus of your essay is on the lesson. But I did use quite a bit of narrative in my essay as well. So I don't think it's a bad idea to put some of that, at least in the beginning of it. I think for me, adding a little bit of it helped to show who I was as a person and how my writing style was. But I think I agree that the majority of it should probably not be super fluff.
All right, awesome. It is 4 o'clock, so we are running a little bit short on time, but we'll try to get to everyone's questions. So let's try to speed run this. I will get to Justin's question. In the application window, the extracurricular part has 2,000 word limit for listing the different extracurriculars. Should I use that space to describe my extracurriculars in detail? Let's go to Alina first.
Yeah, I would say too much like here, details can't hurt, because at least for me, like 2,000 characters was a lot. So just do as much as you can. If there's acronyms, spell them out. Like, don't say SciOlly, say Science Olympiad, and like specifically how you did in things. So just like things like that. Like, I had a lot of math competitions, and I think I like abbreviated some of them. So I would not recommend doing that, because like definitely if you can give more for that, and also for like extracurriculars and stuff, like nothing is too small to leave off. So yeah.
Great. All right, let's head over to the next question. Will communicating with your admission officer to get them to remember who you are help your chances? Let's go to Anna for that one.
So as far as communicating with your officer, it might help, but I wouldn't recommend it as far as a for sure. I'm sure someone could answer that better, but I kind of attended some webinars and I don't think any of that helped them remember me. And as far as getting up with them, I wouldn't make it seem too overbearing, but I'm sure there's someone who could touch on that a bit better.
Hey, yeah, let's get Shashank to touch on that.
Yeah, so I don't think getting in touch with your admissions officers is a horrible idea. I didn't do it. I kind of just, like submitted my application, let it be, and just hope for the best. But like Anna said, as long as you're not like too overbearing and like not spamming your admissions officer, if you happen to know who they are, I'm not entirely sure if they even make it public as to like who exactly they are. But if you have their information, maybe sending them like a introduction email of like, hey, okay, I'm this person, I applied, and I really want to get like, I'm really hoping to get in, something like that as an introduction may be good, but definitely don't spam them with every update of your life outside of your application. You know, like these are people too, and you don't want to like annoy them. But maybe like a small introduction, you know, I wouldn't really see the harm in